Trump economics is a recipe for lower wages, fewer jobs, more debt. He could bankrupt America like he's bankrupted his companies.
Hillary Clinton warning voters that a President Trump would actually mean fewer jobs in America. But some here say Trump is the only presidential candidate who actually created jobs in America. So who's right and who's wrong? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Mr. Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Mike Ozanian, Elizabeth McDonald, John Tamny, and Bruce Jackson. So, Rich, what does Hillary actually know about business?
Well, not much. I haven't heard any distance between her program and President Obama's programs, and that's led to this 2% growth. We're missing $2 trillion of economic growth that we should have had if we'd had better economic governing. But look, I think Trump said something amazing this week. He said he wants to make America rich, that we can only be strong if we're rich. You know, that is a simple, powerful idea.
It is a simple, powerful idea. Bruce, is it a good idea?
I think it would be a good idea if he could get anybody to agree with him. He can't even get the Speaker of the House to agree with him. Listen, Trump would bankrupt the country because he's not willing to touch entitlements, and we don't know enough about his businesses because we haven't seen his tax return for starters. So we really don't know enough about this guy, and you have to get along with people, and that's one of the problems that everybody admits going on in Washington, and he's out there continuing to attack people in his own party.
Well, Steve, one thing we do know is what has happened over the past 7.5 years of a Democratic president. We have had terrible numbers in terms of business creation. In fact, there are more business closings than there are startups. Hillary Clinton just mentioned the debt, that Trump would be lousy for the debt, but look what's happened to the debt. It's doubled in the past 8 years.
Yes, well, what Barack Obama has done is the economic equivalent of waterboarding the economy. And we see it in labor force participation rates. We see it in investment, the lack of it, the lack of startups, the lack of entrepreneurship that we normally have. So if you want 4 more years of that, Hillary Clinton will give it to you. Even worse, she's going to raise taxes, which hurts investment, which is how you get a higher standard of living.
And John Tamny, she mentioned bankruptcy. Of course, not all of the bankruptcies she mentioned were Trump's fault, but the fact is her notion that businesses should always succeed all the time, that says something about what she thinks of business, doesn't it?
It does, because it shows she plainly doesn't understand that any successful businessman is going to have lots of failures and sometimes bankruptcies. Now, looking at that in a bigger picture, the only way to bankrupt the U.S. economy is to have policies that are inimical to economic growth. Hillary's tax ideas are definitely inimical, but I would add that, to be fair, that Donald Trump's ideas on trade would similarly have a very chilling impact on growth.
Okay, well, we can talk about that, but there's another thing besides taxes, EMAC, is regulations. And Heritage Foundation just came out with a new study showing that the regulations put in under President Obama cost $108 billion a year. These are just the regs that President Obama created.
That's unbelievable. That equates to putting the size of Serbia on the businesses' heads. You got to wonder. It's a pipe dream that Congress would ever pass a nuisance tax on the White House. But here's what Hillary Clinton is also saying within, to your point about rules and regulations. There's a lot of rules and regulations in her policies.
Yes.
A lot of changes there. Her policies would cost $1 trillion over the next 10 years. That's according to her own admission. And, Bill Clinton would never accepted his own wife's policies. Remember, he said back in the day, the era of big government is over.
That's true. Mike, there's another thing that Hillary has said, specifically about energy jobs, and more specifically about carbon energy jobs. Let's play the tape.
I'm the only candidate which has a policy about how to bring economic opportunity using clean, renewable energy as the key into coal country, because we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business.
Oh, well, that comment really hurt her a lot in places like West Virginia. She claims the green jobs will replace the carbon energy jobs, but that didn't work out too well over the past 7 years.
No, there were a lot of problems with Obama's program. You had bankruptcies. A lot of companies still aren't making money. But what bothers me most about that comment isn't that it's directed at coal miners, but that she would be as arrogant enough to actually believe she could see the future of energy. Someone who's never been in business, has no idea about what the energy industry is. Somehow she's going to look into a crystal ball and be able to decide the future. I'd much rather have a successful successful businessman like Trump, or even forget him, the woman who owns the nail salon in Glen Rock, where I live, be in charge of the economy, because at least she knows what it's like to meet a daily payroll. Hillary Clinton is clueless.
Okay, I hope she's watching today, by the way. She should know that she'd be a better president, according to Mike Ozanian. Steve, what about the number of jobs? We looked up the number of jobs that we think have been created by the Trump organization. 22,000 is a number that we come up with. It's a guesstimate because it's not a public company. But you look at the Clinton Foundation, which is about the only private sector group that I can think of that she was involved with, 486 jobs in the Clinton Foundation. That's not a great record in comparison.
Well, nonprofit is the key. The Clinton Foundation survives on contributions. Trump has to survive and thrive on satisfying customers. Two very different dynamics. And we all know the motives of some of those who gave to the Clinton Foundation, whereas with Trump, you want to go there for a good time.
That's right. And Bruce, those jobs at the Clinton Foundation are those sort of crony capitalists that we don't want to have in business here, do we?
Listen, I think Hillary understands that you have to get along to get things done in Washington. And you said it best when you talked about Trump's job creation. It is a guesstimate because he's keeping everything to himself, and he's not letting us in on what his businesses really look like.
You're thinking that it is possible that the Trump organization has created fewer jobs than the Clinton Foundation?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we don't know. Let's compare apples. Let's compare apples to apples. Let's compare Trump's empire to a publicly traded hotel company, and let's see what the growth is. We don't know.
I don't think
because
there's
he's not releasing
any question, despite the fact that there's confusion about exactly how much Trump is worth. There's no question about the fact that he has created real jobs where Hillary clearly hasn't.
Well, that's correct. And the canary in the coal mine in this weak American economy is the lack of new business formation, as Steve pointed out. We now have more business failures than we have business startups, which is really a grave situation. And you can point the finger at regulation is the cause, because people don't want to start a business because they don't want to spend half their time on paperwork. And at least Trump has said some really positive things about remaking the regulatory state.
All right, and John, I understand your qualms about Trump's statements on trade, some of which, frankly, sound foolish to me, like you want to force Apple to manufacture iPhones here, which would put them out of business. Everybody would buy Samsung phones if Apple phones went up double in price. So some of those comments are foolish, but he does have a pretty good economic team surrounding him right now, doesn't he?
Let's hope so, but let's also remind everyone that this is basic. There's no mystery about economic growth. It's about politicians getting out of the way, about them removing governmental barriers, spending a weak dollar, taxes to production. This is simple. Let's stop talking about presidents as magical figures that can help us.
I love that. It is not rocket science, Evac. It is pretty straightforward.
It's not rocket science. John Tammany is right. And even the Democratic Party's platform from 1960 through 2008 acknowledged exactly what John Tammany is saying. Lower taxes, less government, lower regulation. They went through an identity crisis as soon as President Barack Obama was elected.
Steve, that's the incredible thing that, as Emac would say, makes my head want to explode. While it's not rocket science, the science fiction that we hear very often from people who believe in planned economies is crazy. They want to force us all into this idea that doesn't really work in the real world.
Yeah, they didn't get the news that the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed. But, David, this is not just about how do you create prosperity. That is a no-brainer. This is also about power. These people know that they're only going to have big things in life by having power over the rest of us. So this is a lot of it's camouflage. They want power.
Thank you, gang. We'll talk about power coming up next. Imagine